The topic tonight is the mind-body connection. So it seems appropriate to look at the relationship of the mind and the body, in particular how it relates to meditation practice. And particularly coming from the point of view of, I think a certain amount of the time, a certain amount of people are looking at the meditation practice as kind of what we would call neck up, working with the mind in terms of thoughts, and people would like to pacify their thoughts or have a clear mind or an open mind or a peaceful mind. And sort of the notion is the body is kind of there ready for us to re-inhabit after we kind of get our mind together. So I wanted to present a slightly different view of the practice itself, and as it applies to working with mind, body, and a third component, which is sometimes called speech, or it's connected with the emotional aspect of life. So I'm going to present a kind of classical Buddhist portrait of the full range of who we are. And it's called the Trikaya. Three kayas, and kaya is spelled, for those of you who are taking notes, which I recommend, is K-A-Y-A, which means body. So the Trikaya, in a sense, is the three, sometimes called the three bodies of Buddha, or the three aspects, the three dimensions of an enlightened being, of our being. And so the sort of paramount one is called the Dharmakaya, the body of Dharma. And sometimes this is called suchness, or as it is, ta-ta-ta, as it is. And the idea of that is at the level of the mind, in its purest sense, there is a kind of fundamental primordial quality of open space and awareness. That's actually the nature of our minds. And that means that before even a thought is formed in our mind, before a million thoughts are formed in our mind, which is the mind we usually bring to the meditation cushion, and before any sort of sense of duality about oneself and our projections and who's doing what to who and what happened and when did it happen and all that, there's a pure, clear, open quality of mind that you could say is just a natural, unconditional wakefulness and awareness. And it has certain qualities that are described. If we want to clue into that, when we are meditating and we bring our mind back from the breath, from the thoughts to the breath, in between there's a kind of open space that sometimes people talk about as gap. Sometimes like the space between thoughts, which is not a dead space, but it has a kind of quality of awareness, and it's cognizant as opposed to dull. So you could call it the resting mind, the mind that doesn't need to be engaged in any particular storyline or particular activity. So that fundamental clarity is always there. So, for example, let's say we're very upset about something, and then at the same time we're aware of the fact that we're upset. That kind of awareness is pure. It doesn't have any bias. It doesn't really have an orientation towards winning, losing. For example, if we are losing, that would be the awareness that we're losing. If we're playing a game, 90% of us is fully connected to, let's say we're playing a ping pong game with somebody and we're getting trounced. 90% of our awareness is going into sort of the pain and the drama of our game and our losing. But 10% of it is simply aware of the whole situation, the shape of the other person playing the game, the table, the rules of the game, all of the feelings that we have, where the ball is at any one moment. And that quality, even no matter how bad things get or how good things get, is kind of completely unobstructed and not really seduced by any of the activity in the mind. So that's what we mean by the Dharmakaya, is the sort of ground awareness. And then we have the level, what's called the Sambhogakaya, which is Sambhoga Kaya, Kaya. That's the air conditioning Kaya. Sorry about that. Hopefully it'll go off again soon. And the Sambhogakaya is called the body of energy, or sometimes translated as bliss. Dangerous word to put out there, lest we get too attached to it. But the idea of free energy, like when you're very happy, you feel joy, right? So it doesn't really feel like it's obstructed by anything. If you're in love, you feel passionate energy. If you're, getting a job done, you feel the energy of activity and motion, wind energy. So all of those qualities are at the level of energy, exchange, communication, speech, breath, prana, movement, and how our mind connects with the world is through that medium, right? So, for example, if we feel attraction, right? We like somebody, there's an energy field there, and we kind of engage that. Now, how we engage that could be very much pure and open and simple, or it could be heavily weighted down by sort of karmic habits and propensities that we've developed. Fear, based on fear, confusion, anxiety, all the rest of it. But it's natural energy, the natural aspect of communication. And then the third kaya is the Nirmanakaya, in the Sanskrit, Nirmana, Nirmana, kaya, which is the body of kaya, the body of embodiment. So it's actually the physical form. At its most, its least psychological aspect, just the form, right? So our form, though, is always connected to these other two kayas. That's why we're alive, actually. And we're connected to the Sambhogakaya, the energy of emotions and reactions, responses, communication, and even we're connected to the sort of level of mind, which is very open and aware all the time. So roughly these correlate to body, speech, and mind. When we're really talking about our practice and our life, both consist of developing a relationship with body, speech, and mind, and in particular ours to start with. But it obviously has also larger implications, because the world, for example, is body, right? And the weather is speech. The movement of energy around the planet, clouds, the rain, the sunlight coming through. And then mind would be correlating to kind of the vastness of space, which is all of it. In other words, all of that is happening in a kind of spacious environment, which anything and everything can happen. Planets come in and out of existence, the sense of space and time being, extremely, extremely vast. So, body, speech, and mind is what we practice with. And so sometimes we think that only thing we're practicing with in meditation is the contents of the mind, the storylines going through the mind, the discursive chatter. That so many people come to meditation and think, I'm going to work with my discursive chatter. And unfortunately, a lot of people think they're going to stifle that and have some miraculous relation to tranquility by stifling the movement and energy and content of the mind. And actually, that's kind of probably, arguably, not the most productive notion of meditation, because it involves us then with a struggle with our mind, where we're only really working with the content of the mind, not the ground awareness at all, A. And B, there's so much material ingrained and habitual patterns there that the idea of just simply squashing it and repressing it and then somehow we'll have happiness and peace is kind of a false, as far as I'm concerned anyhow, notion. From the point of view of the meditation, there's no problem with the energy and content and motion of the mind. It's just we've become so fascinated and obsessed with it that we've lost the ground awareness. We've lost our connection with it, and we've lost our connection with energy, and we've lost our connection with our body. So we're not actually present with the mind, speech, and body. So when we're practicing, the thing I wanted to suggest tonight, yes, Sambhogakaya, that's exactly right, Renee. And good evening, Tara. And Marzia, great to see you from Roma. Fantastic. So we have people from all over the world right now, which is kind of spine-tingling in a way. I'm excited by that, and kind of a new paradigm for communication, live communication that's two ways. And that would be, we're really not communicating through body so much at the moment. So that's one of the things about the internet, is it's really oriented towards speech and mind. And the representation of body that you see is a sort of partial representation. So you sort of see a representation in my physical form, and you're hearing my voice. But it's a little bit remote. So it's going to be interesting to see over time if anybody could really, really go, how far we could go with practice in a virtual domain. Because eventually, it's very good to be in a room with people if you want to have a complete communication. And the reason is because the Nirmanakaya is we call it sometimes a domain of wisdom, when all the ideas we have and all the experiences we have come down like resin and descend into the level of the body. And, at that point it's a difference. It's like the mind has knowledge, but the body has wisdom. And when we meet great teachers, they're the embodiment of wisdom. And so the Buddha that we know, that we're referring to historically here, is called the Nirmanakaya Buddha, the Shakyamuni Buddha that we know about, that lived 2,600 years ago, and was definitely in a physical form, in a physical body, just like us. So that quality is something that allows the communication to come all the way full circle. It's considered extremely auspicious for us when we meet an embodied teacher or part of a lineage in which we can talk to them, touch them, go for a walk, have dinner, but the level of speech and communication is fairly well represented here. And it's interesting in terms of really getting the idea across and sharing our thoughts and feelings about practice, which has happened quite a bit here. So that's also good. And the notion here is that if we're going to create a meditation practice, we're really talking about, there should be instructions for all three levels. What do we do? What's the instruction for working with the mind, the sort of level of abstraction and sort of the area where thoughts are generated from, and the thoughts themselves as the content of the mind? What is the quality of energy that we experience, which is something maybe people don't talk about too much, and maybe think that there's only supposed to be one texture, which is peaceful and accommodating and kind of, easy or laconic. But actually we're going to talk about working with all the energies that arise, which in both their most confused and their most enlightened dimensions, and being very open to whatever comes up in that area. And sometimes that can open somebody's meditation practice tremendously when they realize that they should include or can include that aspect, the energy of the emotions. And that it's not about becoming emotionless and void in a negative sense, even if that might feel like, blissful. The premise with all of that is there's no real problem with the mind. There's no problem with the contents of the mind. There's no problem with the emotions, even when they're distorted and confusing. It's fundamentally not considered a problem. And there's no real problem with the body. Even if we have illness or obstructions that we're working with, or even if we're, very, very healthy. Eventually the body goes through cycles that we all know. Those of you who are younger can take a look at me. And you go, oh, gee, that guy looks funny. He's got white hair, if you're 30. And, intellectually that you will one day have white hair. You may put off the actualization of it by using dyes and bleaches and stuff like that, but your hair is smarter than that. And we go through cycles with the body. We need to respect those cycles. It's not the same for somebody who's 75 sitting or running a marathon or trying to be healthy. It's not the same agenda. So, but I'm not 75, I'm happy to tell you. So, there's the air conditioner. So, body, speech, and mind. What's the instruction? And this is another thing that's sort of become very obvious lately, is that what instructions have all of you had about how to meditate? How do we meditate? What do you do? And my experience has been not to be provocative about this, but I do travel around and teach meditation a lot. And a big part of my experience is that people haven't had much instruction, or if they have, it hasn't been terribly precise in this area of what to do with the body, speech, and mind. And sometimes, therefore, we chase after certain, we have a vague sense of it, we chase after a target and kind of get frustrated and, maybe drop out of the whole thing. So there's a tremendous advertisement or advocacy of clear meditation instructions, which I'm hoping to be able to pass through, because I feel like I did receive those. And I'm hoping that some of you who started to train will then be able to pass it through to the next group of people coming along. And that kind of relay race of information is called lineage, in the Buddhist tradition. It's highly valued. Otherwise, it's, kind of meditation death by rumor. A vague sense of what we're doing, what the results are supposed to be. And in that space, a lot of just kind of a push-pull comes up. I didn't get that, I'm trying to get this, whatever. So, with the body, we're trying to, develop a sane, healthy, appreciative, positive relationship with our body. And that means taking care of our body, getting enough sleep, not straining or stressing it, eating well. Buddha went through all the ascetic practices that people have done over the centuries, of denying the body, of mortifying the body. He did all of that. And if you want to do it, you can do it, but if you want to take his word for the fact that it's not really, at the end of the day, going to be that productive, because that was his discovery after he did all that stuff of kind of, supposedly he was down to 1 grain of rice a day, in an attempt to sort of have the body be very, very light and not obsessed with food and so forth. And then he felt like, I think most of us would, he had a little yogurt shake, and felt like 1,000,000 times better, and then also felt like he could practice much better. So everybody knows that story, and that's sort of the discovery of the middle way. On the other hand, if we stuff ourselves day and night and have too much food coming in, we tend to get sicker faster and sleepier and so forth, so that might not be the ideal relationship to the body as far as if you want to meditate while you're still in that body, which is highly advised because there's a lot of advantages to it. So, the body of meditation is taking a good posture, and all these instructions. Seth, could you also post again the link to the meditation instructions, if you wouldn't mind? So it'll show up in this scroll here. I want to say again, for people who are joining us, if you want to see what other people are saying and contribute to the conversation, you just have to open a second window, facebook.com/David Nichtern, and there'll be a scrolling list of comments there, and you can type yours in there and see what other people are saying. You may have to refresh that screen from time to time. So, Seth is going to post a link to the meditation instructions that we're doing for the new people who haven't had a chance to see that yet, of just doing sort of the basic sitting meditation practice. But this would then apply towards whatever we're doing with our body. It's just in sitting meditation we take a great posture, and a lot of us, have a habitual slump or a kind of shyness or embarrassment about it. So the posture is either cross-legged or kneeling on the floor or sitting on a chair and making good contact and just resting your hands on your knees, thighs, and then extending the long spine, which always you'll feel much happier and healthier if you do that. And then the head is sort of level, and the sense perceptions are open but relaxed. So that's a notion that we think, well, we're going to go somewhere else, right? I'm going to go inside, I'm going to go in some dreamy place. But we're really just allowing the body and all the sense perceptions just to be very present and open, but we're not obsessing on them, and then we're not, sort of collecting a lot of new information obsessively. So you could say the sense perceptions are awake but relaxed. And that includes the eyes being open halfway with a soft downward gaze for most of this kind of practice. So that's called taking your seat, as per the instructions. Even when you do that, you feel it really breaks a lot of karmic patterns, just to stop, pause, take a good seat, and just pause for a minute. So then, having done that, and we'll take this into post-meditation afterwards, having done that, we've created our relationship with our body, which is stable, healthy for the body, actually it is. The prana and energy can flow freely, and in which we can be awake but relaxed. So lying down is not a good body posture for meditation, and running around is usually not. Lying down is going to tend to put us to sleep, and running around is really heavily engaged in activity, and a lot of thoughts come up, and we miss the opportunity then to work with our breath and our mind in a more deliberate way. So then, in the second stage of this practice, which is, as you'll see from, I'll see if Seth posted this yet, is the second stage of the practice is beginning to work actually with the energy of the mind, which is, thank you, Seth, I see that you posted that. The energy of the mind, and if any of you haven't looked at that yet, please go ahead and just afterwards you can just click on that link. And even if you have looked at it, it's worth reading again. A lot of care and thought went into making that as clear as possible. Hi Neely, nice to see you again. Seth Wolf is here also, and Neil Roberts. Okay, Neil, I see your question. So maybe we'll get to we'll see. Maybe we'll get to that if we can. Your question. So the mind has a kind of omnidirectional quality, right? if you don't sort of pay attention to something specific, it kind of starts noticing everything. So that's more in the vipassana or awareness kind of quality of the mind. If we relax our mind in that way and it's able to pay attention through the sense gates to everything going on around us, that's quite a wakeful kind of quality. But the problem is we tend to drift into paying more attention to what we're thinking about. And that's like watching the movie in our head and getting completely lost into it. So the idea of focusing our mind on one thing, which is the idea of shamatha meditation, focusing the mind, is to break through, to cut through our absorption, a kind of meditative absorption. So we're meditating on the thoughts in our head, and we're paying attention to that to the exclusion even of what's happening right in front of us. Even somebody could be streaking through the studio. For those of you who remember streaking, somebody used to take off their clothes and run across the backdrop of somebody talking like this. We wouldn't even notice it. You know, if while we were meditating, somebody ran across in front of us with no clothes on and ran by. If we're too absorbed in our thoughts, we don't even notice what's going on around us. So the purpose of one-pointed concentration or shamatha meditation is to allow the mind to cut through, cut away from, like as they say in the film, cut to. If this was a movie, you'd be watching, you know, your argument with your boss playing out in your mind, and then and cut to awareness of the breath. So, in a way, when we label thinking to pay attention to the breath, we're saying, and cut back to the breath. So I'll talk more about that in a minute. By giving our mind an object in the shamatha meditation, our mind is vast, and it could be either obsessed with our thoughts and kind of drinking at the bar of kind of discursive thought and having another one, or it can be really, really operating through the sense gates and kind of sort of naturally sort of being aware of what's around us, or it can be resting in its own nature without any sort of need to focus on or clarify an object, but it's just simply awake and conscious and cognizant. So of course that's not separate from noticing, since we're in a physical form and we have sense perceptions. It would be the exact same as noticing what's going on. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So the aspect of paying attention to the mind is really, you could say, the mind aspect. What we're really doing, and we've said this before, is synchronizing the activity or energy of the mind with the body. The body is breathing. And the mind comes together with that, one breath at a time. So therefore we have the notion of mindfulness as being exactly synchronizing the mind and body together with whatever you're doing. That's where your awareness is. If you're at the kitchen sink washing the dishes and you're practicing mindfulness, then your mind and your body are in sync. In the sink. Yeah, sync in this case, S-Y-N-C-H, not S-I-N-K. So that would be funny, right, if we had the language barrier. Yeah, David Nichtern said that meditation is about putting your mind and body in the sync. But it's in sync, synchronized. So, the third element of the practice is actually a little bit subtler, and the instructions are quite subtle. And this is, I think, where many people, might get stuck or caught up, is what happens is, in that sort of exercise in awareness, things arise in our mind and body. Feelings arise in the body. Maybe your knee hurts, or you have an itch, or your back, you feel your back, or maybe you have a positive feeling in your body, kind of energetically positive feeling, kind of rush of energy or strength or stability. Right? Those experiences come and go. What also comes and goes is the activity, the content of the mind is just like a projection screen. And the mind is the part that's projecting that onto the kind of background. And then we're looking at that, and kind of our awareness gets caught up completely in what the mind is projecting. So that's where most of our meditation action, as an active meditator, that's where most of the action is the mind is watching the projections, and occasionally that falls away, and we notice that we remember to label thinking, and then we return our awareness to the breath. That's what we're doing. That's all we're doing. So all these other instructions I've heard people make up of trying to extend the space between thoughts or achieve a thoughtless mind, a clear mind, I'm positive that they will just lead us into a kind of impossible exercise, frustration, and a dropout. The field of ex-meditators is littered with people who try to achieve a quiet mind through, you could say, through force of will. So the instruction is just much simpler than that. Simply note it, take a good seat, respect your body, begin to pay attention to the breath going in and out of your body, either at the nose or at the stomach, feeling of rising and falling, or just following the flow throughout. And then we see what comes up. That, in a way, is it. You see what comes up, and when you notice it coming up, when the awareness becomes kind of aware of the projector and the projection being in play, as opposed to just completely absorbed with the storyline, you notice it, you go, you have a moment, really, actually, then of kind of unconditioned awareness. Because what else could notice that? And in that awareness, we recognize the thoughts and the projections and label them as such, just to create a contrast, thinking. And we come back to the feeling of the breath. And we do that over and over again with a very light touch. We should lighten up about this. It's not like heavy lifting. It's not, building a house with your bare hands and moving bricks around and your knuckles are bleeding. It should be a little bit more peaceful than that in the attitude. But of course it's strenuous in a certain way, because we're going against the habit of our mind, which is just to be obsessed with our projections. Our mind is so used to that it's forgotten that it actually has this quality of present awareness. It's been covered over. So when we come back to the breath, you could say, well, what do you do now? What's the point of that? There's no point to that. And the point of having no point to that is so that we can have some time and space where we actually recognize the ground awareness and relax without any particular agenda at all. And that's where the peace element comes in, or the peace, as we say in sort of modern jargon. Because we're not struggling anymore, we're not forcing any kind of shackles of peace around our active mind. We're simply allowing recognition of the process to occur and allowing ourselves to return to a much simpler relationship to our awareness. So that's the mind and the body. Between those two is the energy body, the Sambhogakaya. And what happens is you can recognize that element in a couple of different ways. One is the projections that we have, the storylines, don't seem to just be little flat, monotone narratives. They seem to have intense colors to them. If in that space, that open space of mind, a projection arises which is like, I'm starving. I mean, this talk is fine and whatever, and Dharma is fine, but what I really need is a is to have some hummus and dip. And we start to crave that. The craving itself will have a texture to it, a feeling tone, which actually has a physicality to it, and has a kind of almost color or flavor of mind energy. It's like, if you could draw it, could you draw it? Could you take a cartoon and go, I need. So that's not just saying, I need hummus. That's saying, I need some hummus. It's like there's energy there. So this is where our experience of the energies of the world is often very contoured to our sort of, you could say, narrow ego band, self-imaging, ego-centered kind of way of working with energy, which is basically like, I'm furious at this person because they dissed me. Well, then you're not really seeing the whole play of that energy. You don't even really feel the energy accurately, but you're all like this, and it has a storyline mixed with it, and we're totally absorbed with that. That's the mind that we bring to the meditation cushion. It's just like that. It moves between storylines that are a little more abstract and kind of blah, 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 and then these powerful feelings of the energy associated with them. And rather than feeling the energy in a pure way, it's totally locked in with the storyline. So we don't even really know what it feels like to get angry. We're so obsessed with the content of the anger that the pure energy of anger is, and we just had this workshop in Wilmington, is actually has a tremendous relationship to clarifying. And the pure energy of craving has a lot to do with the energy of fulfillment, richness. So we're just beginning, you could say, in our meditation practice to create some kind of more sane relationship to these energies and recognize that they have a transcendental quality. They're not only there to service our kind of egocentric storyline, and they're natural too. So we don't want to throw them out. We want to just kind of change our relationship to them. And that's the transformative aspect. So that aspect, the Sambhogakaya, becomes a very important element of how we work with our meditation. We have to work with our emotions and our energies. You can't find somebody who's enlightened who gets angry and doesn't know why. A friend of mine just told me a funny story about these monks that they knew in Japan who were having the hardest time with this thing. And she's saying, isn't that the first noble truth, that the truth of suffering? It was such a cute story. And they were going, oh no, that's, if you want to understand the Four Noble Truths, that's really complicated. But to understand the truth of suffering, all you have to do is to have one moment of feeling out of whack, out of sync with your emotions. Like you want to get rid of something. You feel so bad and you want to get rid of it. Or you feel so desperate you have to have it. Or you feel so proud that you can't even, you're deaf, dumb, and blind. To find the space in which these emotions have more intelligence to them than that is part of the practice. So at this point, the idea is that we are opening in our meditation, right on the cushion, open to the body, open to the quality of the mind and everything that's in the mind, and just the pure quality of thought and non-thought, and open to the energies of your experience. Without trying to clamp anything down, we're really trying to cultivate a space in which we become very aware of all of that, without any judgment or manipulation at all. At all. So that's contrary to our habit. Usually we're trying to manipulate all that stuff to get what we think in a limited way is going to be a more positive result. We're control freaks, basically. And we're living in a world that needs some elements of control, but probably we've put all the dials and knobs in the wrong place. We need some element of control, opening our awareness, opening our hearts, opening our speech, opening our minds. And the irony of the Buddhist teachings is you can open them fully And that's the best possible situation. Contrary to when we're afraid, we think we better not do that. So unbiased or unconditional awareness is where the ship is heading to. And unlimited friendliness, compassion, insight, clarity, these are the qualities we already have that we're trying to open those qualities and remove a limited sense of what we can do with all that. So, making a relationship with the body, being open to the emotional energies that come up, and not trying to shut it down or manipulate it, and really recognizing the natural quality of the mind's awareness without any content, just the natural quality of it. And that, of course, includes seeing the thoughts. It doesn't mean you have to not stop thinking, because that's included. So then our meditation can move towards a much more kind of, our discipline is our control is very subtle and very light touch of, since we're way distracted, we can't even get onto the playing field, using a little thread of mindfulness, then cultivating awareness, then maybe cultivating openness and compassion by sort of opening some of those gates up, But gradually we just come home to the notion that all of this is a tiny little inch away rather than miles and hundreds of miles away. So then in life, we have a body and we have emotions and we have mind and mind activity. And if you can progress your practice to the point where there's not a huge difference between when you're sitting on the cushion and when you're having a conversation or operating your technology or washing the dishes or cooking, then you have the post-meditation practice adding to the fruitional possibilities. And the great thing about seeing post-meditation relating mindfully and openly to the body and in a healthy way, and to the speech and the breath and the emotions in a healthy way, and to the mind and the contents of the mind in a healthy way, that we're in post-meditation probably 23 hours a day, and maybe only formally meditating an hour a day. So we should not even hesitate for one moment to think that all these principles apply off the cushion. And the key is the spark of recognition, recognizing that awareness is present in the situation and allowing that to come through and decreasing or cutting through our obsession with our projections and being just sort of stuck there. So I think that's mostly what I have to say about this, and I'm going to invite everybody, maybe you have already, to lob in some comments or questions, and we'll spend the rest of the time discussing that. Again, sorry for that air conditioner. If there's anybody new, I'm reminding you that if you want to comment or see the flow of comments, simply type in, open a second window in your browser, type in facebook.com/DavidNickturn, and then you'll see a scroll there that you can add to. And right now it'd be really great if you feel like adding in your comments and questions and points for discussion. You can see other people's comments, so you can respond to those as well, and we'll present those. And then for those of you who are, again, watching in non-real time, obviously you can't do that. That's the benefit of showing up live, is that we get to have a sort of live conversation. But I would also invite you to feel free to just lob me a message on Facebook if you have any questions, or we post pretty periodically, so you could throw it up on one of those comment scrolls. And let me take a look and see. Pretty sure some people have written in by this point. And for those of you who are watching non-real time, I'm also going to voice the question so you'll know what people have said. But now, please do feel free to lob in comments and questions as much as anybody likes to. So, hi Billy Bouzano, wow, nice to see you. And Jello is giving she's a yoga teacher, she's giving a practical piece of advice that keeping the hips higher than the knees in the body realm helps with lower back pain. So that's a good point. Sitting on folded blankets if you don't have a cushion. So she's just giving a very practical piece of advice there. Seth Wolf is saying, laugh out loud, but I'm not sure exactly what that referred to. So Seth Wolf, maybe you can be more specific and write back. And let's see. So again, I see quite a few of you online, so please do type in a question or comment so we get into the discussion part. It's not just all me. Yeah, so Laurel, I hope I'm saying your name. Is it Laurel or Laurel? I'm not sure. And can you also, when you type in, just tell me where you are, because that's fun for everybody. Laurel is saying, any thoughts on working with the emotions during meditation, i.e. anxiety? Definitely. There are some, recommendations for how to work with the emotions, because one of the qualities of the emotions is just like water. Like a tsunami comes up and you say, how do I maintain my stability of practice when there's a kind of very vivid emotion? And the word emotion is funny because it has motion built into it. It tends to move us. It tends to move us. If we're angry, it tends to move us across the room to hit somebody. If we're passionate, it tends to move us across the room to hug somebody. And anxiety is a very interesting energy, and I don't mean to be, I'm not trained in any kind of clinical way, so I'm not going to talk about it from a clinical perspective, but just from the point of view of the experience of meditation, how to work with that. My personal experience of anxiety is that it's future-based primarily. Something could happen in the future that would not be good, So a lot of energy of the body systems and the emotional systems is marshaled as if we need to go on to yellow alert, right? So anxiety has the quality of yellow alert, like, something's coming, it might be dangerous, it might be upsetting, and we don't know exactly what to do, so there's a kind of free floating energy to that. And my recommendation would be just experience the energy of it, and in a way label label thinking. If you get involved, if there's a storyline to it, we can definitely tag that and say thinking, and also feel from a Vipassana sense, what does that feel like? Because at that point, once you've identified the thought and separated the thought from the energy from the energy of the emotion, you'll feel it as body. That's why I'm saying you got to meditate with the whole body and the emotions and the mind. That's not just a purely mental event in an isolated sense. The body has all kinds of things going through, and our recommendation is bring them into your field of awareness and just be aware of it in a very non-judgmental, non-manipulative way. Don't even think about, I got to get rid of this. That will create tension on top of the anxiety. Just go, I am ready to notice the detailed storyline and let that part go. And then on top of that, I just want to include with my attention to the breath just a kind of sense of becoming sensitive to being aware of what the energy feels like. So that would be true for anything that arises, even depression or anxiety, or longing, or sadness, or joy. We're just not trying to not feel it. We're trying to feel it vividly, without characterizing it and without extending the storyline further. So it becomes the object of awareness. And also that requires a big leap of faith in one's basic goodness, that it's workable. So, when Trungpa Rinpoche first came to the West, his seal is A and Vam, those two syllables together. And he translated as the proclamation of truth is fearless. And the sort of translating one notch further, is that everything that arises is workable. So we might need to have some basic confidence and support for that view that you can work with it. And then, as I say, I'm not discussing this as a clinician or anybody who's working with somebody with severe anxiety to the point where what I'm saying is just too hard to wrap your mind around. That if you have that level of anxiety, probably is a good idea, to work with a more clinical setting. But I believe, for most of us, it's garden variety. It's like anxiety is like there's a garter snake and you're seeing like a boa constrictor. There's a projection onto what's going to happen that's purely habitual, purely karmic. It's not intrinsic. There's no part of the mind that can hold that kind of thing permanently. And so if we can rouse our sort of confidence in our own workability and basic goodness, and then develop curiosity and bring the awareness to that, and really be disciplined about not just engaging the storyline over and over. So I hope that's helpful, Laurel. And please feel free to write in again if that wasn't clear. So I'm going to look for more questions for a moment here. Oh, okay, now we have quite a few coming in. You guys are the greatest. We're online and rocking it. Virtual. Wow. Okay, a lot of questions. So let's see how we can take a few of them for sure. Neely, Laurel is asking my question. Only primary emotions coming up for me, the primary emotion coming up for me are grief and anger / frustration. Some of this is anger, frustration that my body has chronic problems that don't get better the way I would like. Yeah. Well, let's say, Neely, if we followed what I just said, in terms of talking to Laurel, or Laurel, I'm sorry, Laurel, I don't know how to pronounce your name. So Laurel also said that explanation helped her. So maybe, I wonder, Neely, if we could apply it again and just say, those thoughts come up while you're meditating. They're going to come up. Why wouldn't they come up? Why shouldn't you be angry and frustrated? You might think, well, if I were a Buddha or something, I wouldn't be angry and frustrated. But who cares? I mean, that's your life right now. So those things come up. That's like the start where you are part of the program. Now, if you can, though, separate out in your practice, label the thoughts thinking. So you recognize we've become way attached to the text line, the narrative, and actually letting some of that go. There you are, right now, right? With the pain, with the frustration, with the irritation, with the sense of not being able to shake this thing, not being able to transcend it. And allow yourself to feel that without any judgment or aggression. And that is not saying put the whole matter to rest. Of course, you're going to look creatively as much as possible for working with your relative situation as sanely, as intelligently, as brilliantly as possible. That's what we all do. That's part of the journey of having a body at all, that is exactly what happens at the body level, is there's a sort of, we're kind of fragile. We're very strong, You're still able to eat, I assume, and do things in the world. And so, there might be a sense of finding things that are enjoyable with it, even that include the situation you have, that you can do and that are enjoyable. And from a practice point of view, it's just going, allowing yourself to feel it. And maybe there's some sadness, too, there that you could just feel more and give into a little bit. And, softening into it. And then get all the best help you can get, for whatever the circumstances are. So I think the principle's the same, always the same. To bring it into awareness and to sort of begin to take the habitual storylines offline a little bit. They're not that productive. So let's see. Joel is saying, what part does curiosity play with the kayas? Yeah. Well, curiosity is such a great thing because you could say that awareness is a knowing kind of quality. But on the verge of awareness, we're curious. And that's a healthy gateway to real knowledge, curiosity. Because what curiosity is really doing is saying, I'm innocent here, I'm open, and I would like to be able to separate out a kind of fixed view in which I'm not curious, right? When people have a fixed view, they're stubborn and they're thick, and they're not curious. And so curiosity to me would be a weather vane that points towards awareness. It says, what's up with that? You know that thing on Saturday Night Live, what's up with that? That would be curiosity. And what's up with that is returns us, the curiosity is a good instinct that returns us to sort of exploring the awareness more and not getting so stuck and fixed. So, anyhow. Jen, hi Jen. See you. I hope I see you at the end of the month at Kripalu. I think you're going to be there. So, Jen plays fiddle with Krishnadas, and we're going to be up with him and Sharon Salzberg, a wonderful meditation teacher, the last weekend in Kripalu. And if you come, you can see me in my disguise as a guitar player, and my happy disguise. So hope we see some of you there. Jan is saying, could we say that emotions are represented in all three bodies, body, speech, and mind? Well, so yes, good point. And I think what we'd say is at the level of body, emotions would really mostly be expressed as physical sensation. You know, like, I don't know too many people who are not, kind of very heady and, maybe inclined toward anger, who are not tight in the shoulders, because that's what's holding your head up. And there's like a feeling of like, that. And the body has all kinds of emotional energies moving through it. It has just basically the Sambhogakaya energies moving through the body are either blissful or painful. When we experience joy, our body sings in a certain way. And when we experience painful emotions, our body is usually going, hey, this doesn't feel good. So the body from that point of view is just a little mirror, a little pocket mirror of the emotions and the mind. At the level of Sambhogakaya, the emotions are said to be the Buddhas. The Sambhogakaya Buddhas are the energy of the emotions, unobstructed. So if that energy is freely moving in our sort of, we call it energy body, we have, again, a kind of, if it's moving freely, we have a sort of happiness quality. And if they're bottled up and kind of like, you might have like the equivalent of bad weather at the energy body level. If anybody can see energy bodies, you can let me know. But in a way, you can see them. It's sort of the more intangible. When we see somebody and we feel, wow, they're really pissed off, and it's not even like at the level of what they said or what they did. So the energy body is something you can experience. And then at the level of mind, emotions would be we would see them as part of a huge mandala, a kind of a almost map or overview of the whole thing. But you could say at the pure Dharmakaya level, there's not really any need for them. And then they go, oh, okay, I'm going to come down and dance and play. And then they either play nice or they don't play nice. And at the body level, all the karmas, accumulate. Our body is just karma factory. Karma residue. So the mind is tricky, and the kayas, by the way, are the three of them are said to be inseparable. So it's not like we can shave off. A lot of people's notion of enlightenment is we can just shave off the Dharmakaya and jettison the body, jettison the emotions, and sort of be some kind of cosmic event somewhere. But they're all three are cross-pollinating all the time, like yin and yang. They're integral, interwoven. And so the fourth kaya is called the Svabhavaka kaya, which I can't spell, so don't ask me to, which is the union of the other three. So that's the fourth one. So yeah, that's a good one, Jen. You know, it's the interconnection, I would say, is what you're really looking at there. Mary, hi Mary from Southern Ohio. Your instructions really help to clear up the how to meditate. Like I'm not doing it wrong. Your time and kindness is appreciated. Thank you. Well, you know, thank you for saying that. It's this last weekend I was teaching in Wilmington with students who've been coming around for a while now. This tremendous feeling of, like, as people sort of start to practice more seriously and come along with it, of being able to, you know, sort of, you could say, continue the conversation and take it, you know, further. And I'm right now personally really appreciating that. So when people are telling me they're practicing and this is helpful, and that's like, you know, basically music to my ears. So thank you, Mary, for saying that. Let's see. I'm going to take one more shot at this, and then we're kind of running out of time. While I'm loading the questions, if any of you are in or near the Washington, D.C. area, this weekend, Cindy, my wife, who's one of the great yoga teachers, as most of you know, and I are doing a Yoga Body Buddha Mind workshop in D.C. And if you go to either the omyoga.com website or the davidnickturn.com or the Facebook page, you'll see how to get there. So if you're in that area, golly, you can come for one or three of the sections of the workshop. You can just come for 3 hours, and you got to tell me you're a virtual friend and that you're now have wanted to communicate in the Nirmanakaya, in the embodiment level, in full, all 5 sense perceptions connecting, and I'll be happy to see you there. So hopefully some of you will show up and come by. And I have time. Maybe we're going a little over this week, so I don't want to bore the heck out of everybody. Wow, okay, whole bunch of questions. So yeah, Jen, just to finish that up, she's saying, not sure if I meant to say Nirmanakaya. Oh, and the above question. Okay, wait, here's the above question. With how much time we are all plugging in online as a culture, what do you see as the long-term effects of the potential atrophy in the awareness of Nirmanakaya and an exaggeration in the activity of the speech and mind-body? Do we need to consider this imbalance as we approach our practice? Yes. That's why we balance it off with yoga and other body practices. So I recommend anybody who's doing meditation practice and gets seriously into it also takes on a mind-body practice like Tai Chi or martial arts or sports or running, swimming or yoga, and really brings the principles that we're talking to bear within that discipline. I think we have to compensate. So I agree with you. So Seth Wolf is asking, is shamatha a primer to eventually do the wisdom work of the Abhidharma, which is more of an intellectual study for those of you who don't know what that is, to understanding the deeper karma? Yes. So in other words, shamatha is a primer to everything, and we call it the foundation practice because all it is simply learning how to focus and bring awareness together. And as some of my friends have pointed out, you could use it to build, a nuclear weapon. It has no bias, shamatha, towards insight, towards compassion, any of those things. So, of course, though, without the foundation of mindfulness, it's very hard then to stabilize the mind enough to really do any kind of good investigation, which is what Abhidharma is. It means the pattern of the dharmas, or investigating how things arise, how they abide, and how they dissolve, and particularly in the abiding sense of really understanding the quality and the diversity of the thinking mind and how that works. So, yes, shamatha would be a prelude to studying Abhidharma and codependent origination and the skandhas and the nidanas and all that kind of stuff. And it would be a good prelude to doing compassion practice too. So, Seth, let's not forget about that part. Straight up old Maitri, Metta, Lojong, Tonglen, developing our hearts and our sense of opening our clever minds to the raw joys and sorrows of our friends and neighbors. But good question, Seth. Shamatha is the ground practice. Not and this is something I've been talking about a lot lately. It's not the final frontier, in terms of Buddhism. It's presented in the West sometimes as Buddhism is mindfulness, and that is part of it. But mindfulness is more generic than Buddhism, which goes further than that in terms of really investigating the quality of what's real, what's not real. So mindfulness is not the whole picture, but it sure is important ground. Now, Neely is saying, "Heh," which I'm assuming is a laugh. Actually, I'm not still able to eat. I have a G tube. Oh my dear. Spent a lot of time trying to change that with little success. Well, Neely, I'm sorry to hear that, and hope you don't have too much physical suffering along with that, pain, and that it's manageable and workable. And it's very difficult once there's a lot of discomfort and a lot of frustration at that physical level to keep your practice clear. And I think if you can do some Maitri meditation, loving kindness meditation, which is also, you can get the instructions from here, for yourself. And have people around you, it's very important, have people around you who just simply get who you are at the core, the very foundation of it all, and in an atmosphere of affection and affection for yourself and acceptance of what's happening. And you may have to let go of pushing too hard to get beyond what's happening. But I'm very sympathetic, and I know from our exchanges here this has come up a couple of times. And I want to invite you, if you want to just have a private chat about any of it, just let me know via Facebook, and we could even do a Skype session or something like that, okay? And just talk a little bit more about the circumstances. But I would be very happy to do that if you want to, okay? So last one, and I'm sorry to everybody if we didn't get more. This has been a very juicy topic. I still see a lot of people online, but I don't want to go forever here. So Vanya, my thought, or Vanya, I'm not sure which, sorry. My thought is that the purpose of meditation has to do with gaining power over our body and mind, finding mental, physical, emotional peace. But actually, practicing involves accepting things exactly as they are. I do believe that adding emotional criticism to what's happening in you does tend to make things worse. But how do you harness the inspiration, that dissatisfaction with the way things are, when you're practicing acceptance? Or am I completely missing the point? Wish that came out clear or hard to type and listen at the same time. Hi from Cleveland, by the way. Great question. Wow. Interesting question. Essence of question, as far as I get it, is how can you accept things the way they are, but also use the inspiration to bring out the very you could say, transformative element of the practice, which is basically you accept things the way they are, but you're also looking for a way to change the norm or the habit of how we react when we don't accept things the way they are. If we accept things the way they are, then that's a very open state, you know? And this is very clearly gives us tremendous resourcefulness to change whatever needs to be changed in any given moment without a huge agenda. This is, for me, the great teachers have all had that. They have that kind of open mind, but then right in the moment you could plug in something that's very helpful to people and sharp and clear from that agendaless space. So I think we're talking essentially about this sort of more absolute or unconditional quality of the practices, to really just recognize that things are as they are, and that a lot of the times we're making it worse by trying to improve them. But some part of our instinct to improve them is connected to our notion of transforming confusion into wisdom, transforming anger into clarity, transforming attachment into true love and curiosity, transforming dullness into expansion and accommodation, transforming pride into sense of richness and fulfillment, and transforming speed, stress, and anxiety into getting things done. So I think you can hold your acceptance in one hand and start wielding your skillful means in the other towards, moving the thing around, dharmically speaking. And that you can hold both of those at the same time. So I think that's kind of a good note to end on. I apologize to anybody whose question I didn't get to answer. Thanking you again for coming around to the virtual Dharma gathering. And we'll be on next week at 7, and we'll think of something good to talk about. So your questions have been fantastic, very inspiring. Sending best wishes to all of you, wherever you are, whatever you're trying to get going at a relative level in your life. Good wishes for that, and good wishes for your practice. And see you all in a week. Okay?